It took the twins twice as long to walk home since they had moved into the rental house. It was a boring home with brown walls and a flat roof. Windows were few and the front yard consisted only of a plain grass lawn that was barely alive because the sprinklers didn't work. The Baileys' home was cozy but cluttered. They had more furniture than they had room for, and none of it matched the house because it was never intended to. Even though they had lived here for more than half a year, unpacked boxes were still lined up against the walls. None of them wanted to unpack them. None of them wanted to admit they were staying as long as they actually were. The twins immediately went up the stairs and into their separate bedrooms. Alex sat at her desk and started her homework. Connor laid on his bed and started a nap. Alex's bedroom could have been mistaken for a library if it weren't for the bright yellow bed tucked away in the corner. Bookshelves of all heights and widths lined the room, holding everything from chapter books to encyclopedias. Connor's bedroom was more like a cave, in which he appropriately hibernated whenever he could. It was dark and messy. Patches of carpet could be seen in between piles of dirty clothes. A half-eaten grilled sandwich tray rested on the floor and had been there for far too long for anyone's peace of mind. An hour or so later, the twins heard sounds that meant their mother was visiting from work, and they went downstairs to join her in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table while on the phone, flipping through a stack of envelopes she just collected from the mailbox. Charlotte Bailey was a very pretty woman with red hair and freckled skin that the twins undoubtedly had inherited from her. She had a huge caring heart and loved her kids more than anything else in the world. Unfortunately, they hardly ever saw their mother anymore. She was a nurse at the local children's hospital and was forced to work constant double shifts to support the family since her husband passed away. Mrs. Bailey was already gone before the twins woke up every morning and would get home after the twins had gone to sleep. The only time she had with the twins anymore was on the brief lunch and dinner break she spent at home. Mrs. Bailey loved her job and loved taking care of children at the hospital, but hated that it took time away from her own. In a way, the twins felt they had lost both their parents after their dad's death. Hi guys, Mrs. Bailey said to the twins, covering the receiving end of the phone. Did you have a good day at school? Alex nodded positively. Connor gave her an overly enthusiastic thumbs up. Yes, I can work a double this Monday, she said into the phone, speaking with someone from the hospital. No problem, she lied. Most of the envelopes she was looking through had bright red warning stickers saying final notice of payment due. Even working the hours she worked, Mrs. Bailey had to get creative with money sometimes. She put the envelopes face down on the table, hiding them from the twins. Thank you, Mrs. Bailey said into the phone and clicked it off. She turned to her children. How are you guys? Good, they both said passively. Mrs. Bailey's mom tuition turned on. She knew something was troubling them. What's the matter? She asked, studying their faces. You seem a little down. Alex and Connor looked to each other, unsure of what to say. Did their mother know about their old house? Should they tell her? Come on, their mother said. What is it? You can tell me anything. We aren't upset, Connor said. We knew it was going to happen eventually. What? Mrs. Bailey asked. The house sold, Alex said. We saw it today on our way home from school. There was a moment before anyone said anything. This wasn't news to Mrs. Bailey, but the twins could tell she was just as disappointed about it as they were, and had hoped they wouldn't notice. Oh, that, Mrs. Bailey said, brushing it off. Yes, I know. You shouldn't be sad about it, though. We'll find a bigger and better house as soon as we catch up on things here. And that was that. Mrs. Bailey wasn't a good liar, and neither were the twins. Still, Alex and Connor always smiled and nodded along with her. What did you learn in school today? Their mother asked. So much, Alex proclaimed with a huge smile. Not much, Connor mumbled with a scowl. That's because you fell asleep again. Alex startled. Connor gave Alex a dirty look. Oh, Connor, not again, Mrs. Bailey said, shaking her head. What are we going to do with you? It's not my fault, Connor said. Mrs. Peters' lessons put me to sleep. It just happens. It's like my brain switches off or something. Sometimes even my old rubber band trick doesn't work. Rubber band trick? Mrs. Bailey asked. I wear a rubber band around my wrist and snap it every time I get sleepy, Connor explained, and I was positive it was foolproof. Mrs. Bailey shook her head, more amused than anything. Well, don't forget how lucky you are to be in that classroom, Mrs. Bailey said with the cult-inducing mom look. All the kids at the hospital would like nothing more than to trade places with you and go to school every day. They'd change their mind if they met Mrs. Peters, Connor said under his breath. The phone rang just as Mrs. Bailey was about to continue scolding her son. Hello, Mrs. Bailey said, answering the phone, the very lines on her forehead becoming very prominent. Tomorrow? No, there must be a mistake. I told them I couldn't work at all tomorrow. It's the twins' 12th birthday, and I was planning on spending the evening with them. Alex Connor looked at each other with the same surprised expression. They had almost forgotten they were turning 12 that day. Almost. Are you positive there's no one else who can cover it? Mrs. Bailey asked, her voice sounding more desperate than she wanted it. No, I understand. Yes, of course, I'm aware of the staff guards. Fine. See you tomorrow. Mrs. Bailey hung up the phone, closed her eyes, and let out a deep, disappointed sigh. I've got some bad news, guys, she told them. It looks like I have to work tomorrow night, so I won't be here for your birthday, but I'll make it up to you. We'll celebrate when I get home from work the next night, all right? That's fine, Mom, Alex said cheerfully, trying to make her feel better. We understand. It's okay, Connor added. We weren't really expecting anything special anyway. The situation made Mrs. Bailey feel like the worst mother in the world, and their understanding made her feel even worse. She would have rather watched them throw a fit or get angry or show any emotion appropriate for their age. They were too young to be used to disappointment. Oh, Mrs. Bailey said, fighting back the sadness inside her. Great. Then we'll have dinner and get a cake and have a nice night. Now I'm just going to go upstairs for a minute before I head back to work. She left the kitchen and hurried up the stairs and into her bedroom. The twins waited a beat before climbing up the stairs to check on her. They peered into their mother's bedroom. She was sitting on a bed, crying, with rolled-up balls of tissue in both her hands, talking to a framed photo of her late husband. Oh, John, Mrs. Bailey said. I try to stay strong and keep our family going, but it's really hard to do without you. They're such good kids. They don't deserve this. She quickly dried her tears when she felt the twins watching her. Alex and Connor slowly walked into her room and sat on either sides of her. I'm so sorry for everything, Mrs. Bailey said to them. It just isn't fair that you have had to go through all of this at such a young age. It's going to be okay, Mom, Alex said. We don't need anything special for our birthday. Birthdays are overrated anyway, Connor added. We know things are tight right now. Mrs. Bailey put her arms around them. When did you two become so grown up? She asked them with watery eyes. I'm the luckiest mom in the world. All their eyes fell on the photo of Mr. Bailey. You know what your dad would say if he were here? Mrs. Bailey asked the twins. He'd say, right now we are living in an ugly chapter of our lives, but books always get better. The twins smiled at her, hoping it was true.